Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating puzzle, one that explains everything, from our oldest myths to the movies we binge watch today. I mean, really think about it for a second. Why do so many stories feel familiar? It doesn't matter if you're looking at ancient texts or the latest Hollywood blockbuster, certain patterns just keep showing up. It's like we're all secretly working from the same script. The question is, what if that script is actually hardwired right into our brains? And right here, this is the key that unlocks the whole thing. The most powerful, most enduring stories on Earth aren't the ones that are necessarily fact for fact true. Nope, they're the ones that fit perfectly into the shape of the human mind. So to really get a handle on the stories, we first have to understand the brain that they're made for. You see, our minds aren't just empty containers waiting for facts. They are, from the ground up, story processing machines. There's actually a name for this, narrative cognition. It just means that our brains are built to see the world as a story. We don't see random events. We instinctively search for a plot. We look for a beginning, a middle, and an end. We need to know who the hero is, what they want, and what's going to happen next. This slide lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the world as it often feels, just a chaotic jumble of information, isolated facts, a lot of uncertainty. But our brains take that mess and, like a master editor, turn it into what you see on the right, a neat, tidy sequence with clear cause and effect, all building towards some kind of meaning. A story literally turns noise into a signal we can understand. Okay, so if our brains are basically story-shaped, it makes sense that certain story shapes will fit better than others, right? And over thousands of years, a kind of narrative natural selection has taken place, leaving us with a handful of patterns that are, well, they're practically immortal. And this is just mind-blowing when you think about it. It doesn't matter what culture or what century you're in. These same 6 fundamental story structures are absolutely everywhere. They are the great survivors of human storytelling. All right, so here they are. First up, the story of a lost paradise, followed by a fall from grace. Think the Garden of Eden. Then there's the Chosen One story, which you see in everything from Moses to Star Wars. Third, the moral test, where one choice changes everything. Fourth is all about redemption, punishment followed by restoration. Fifth, you've got the story of sacrifice leading to renewal, a hero dying to save everyone else. And finally, the classic tale of a champion who brings order to chaos. The reason these 6 are so powerful is that they take our own deep internal experiences, our hopes, our fears, our sense of guilt, our desire for justice, and they project them onto a huge cosmic screen. So you have to see this as a kind of evolutionary process for ideas. Stories are constantly competing for our attention, and the ones that fit our psychological wiring the best, those are the ones that get remembered, retold, and passed down. The others, they just fade away. So what happens when one of these super successful, psychologically perfect stories gets a major promotion? What happens when a story that was just a human story becomes a sacred one? Well, this is the next big step in the journey. You take a story that already works, one that people are primed to believe in, and you elevate its status. You say it didn't come from a clever storyteller, it came directly from God. And look at what that does. Before, a story might be seen as just a wise fable, a symbolic myth, but after it becomes sacred, that very same story is treated as a divine command, as literal, factual history. The structure of the story hasn't changed at all, but its authority suddenly becomes absolute. But here's the crucial thing to remember. Even with that new sacred status, the story's bones, its underlying architecture, is still recognizably human. In fact, it has to be. It has to be built on one of those patterns that resonates with us, or it just wouldn't work in the first place. So what's the big takeaway here? It means we now have a completely different way to look at the most powerful stories in our world, especially the sacred ones that have shaped entire civilizations. And this is it, the central idea. The real power of a story isn't about whether it really happened. It's about what that story does for the people who tell it. It's about its psychological function, how it creates meaning, builds community, and answers our deepest questions about life. This leads to a huge shift in how we approach these stories. For centuries, the big debate around myths and religious texts has been stuck on one, often impossible, question. This is the much better, much more interesting question. Why has this specific story survived for thousands of years when so many others have disappeared? What deep psychological need does it meet so perfectly that generations of people have repeated it, defended it, and even died for it? That's where you find the real meaning. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. If the stories that take over the world are the ones that fit our psychology, it's worth asking, what stories are shaping our world right now? And even more personally, what stories are you ready to hear